jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jessica Corry, and you're watching Independent Thinking. Tonight, we're talking property rights, and more specifically, whether or not the city should downzone to make it harder to build a multi-unit dwelling on your own property. Now, at first glance, this might not be the sexiest issue. This may not even be the way you plan to spend your Friday night, but let me tell you this. This decision by the City Council could mean a difference of thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars if you are currently a Denver property owner or you plan to become one here in the future. Tonight, we have with us two experts in the area of property rights. We have one that's laughing right here, Mr. Charlie Brown. He is on the Denver City Council, and he has been an opponent of the current proposal to downzone major swaths of the city. So thank you so much for being here with us, Mr. Councilman. And then we have my favorite Independence Institute-er, fellow colleague for freedom, Mike Krause. He directs the Justice Policy Network or project?
Justice Policy Initiative.
Initiative, thank you very much. Yeah. And now you are also trying to take over property rights, which is my domain as the director of the Property Rights Project. So.
Correct. I will be taking over your policy.
Certainly,
center.
There's enough issues for us to talk about. And actually, that gets me to the first point, which is that out of all of the calls we get at the Independence Institute concerning property rights, a growing number of them, probably more than a dozen a week, deal specifically with concerns about zoning. This is becoming a very important issue in the 21st century. Lay it out there for us. Why should Denver voters be concerned?
Well, this has been, by the way, this is nothing new. This has been going on for years. The Denver City Planning has been working on a new zoning code for Denver for years, and it's supposed to be the vehicle through which Blueprint Denver is implemented, which is now an 8 or 9-year-old document that lays out the future of the city. The problem is that when they introduced the first draft of this new code in June, it's nothing short of bizarre. And let me give you an example. I own a R2 lot in the Berkeley neighborhood of Denver, with a little tiny house sitting on top of it.
Tell us, R2 is what exactly?
R2, depending on lot, R2, most of Northwest Denver is zoned R2, and depending on lot size means you can build a multi-family dwelling, right. a duplex. And so the new zone, under the current zoning code, I could scrape my little house off my big lot and build a side-by-side duplex. But under the current zoning code, I can't build a carriage house back by the alley. So it's a little bit bizarre. Under the new zoning code, I can't do either. So my neighborhood will be single-family detached only. And so my options to add value to my property are going to be severely limited under the new code.
How much will this cost you personally?
Well, it's a good question. We don't know. We don't know what this is going to do to R2 properties. We do know that they'll no longer have any value to duplex developers. But we don't know in the bigger picture what's going to happen. Now, in the long term, the value could go up. Because that'll mean that housing becomes more scarce in Denver, and when you limit supply, prices go up because people aren't going to stop moving to Denver.
Good point. And now you're from the City Council, and you've been listening to these negotiations over the last several months and several years. How did we get to this point? Was it just outrage over the McMansion duplexes that were turning up, or how did we get here?
We got here because we have an antiquated zoning code currently. It's more than 50 years old, and frankly and candidly, it needs to be changed. I think the issue, though, is who will the city be listening to? Who will the community planning and development staff be listening to as we rewrite this code? And nothing is firmed up yet. As you know, Mike, we have delayed this now. We probably won't be voting on this until February of next year. But I've always
no vote this month then?
No, there's no vote this month, no vote over the holidays.
And that's a new development, right?
That's a fairly, well...
Yeah, actually it is.
Yeah,
we just heard that last week, and I certainly agree with it. They've been working on this for more than 4 years, and it's a powerful task force, there's no doubt. My concern is that the input comes from a variety of people and that it is balanced. Yes, you're going to have the neighborhood activists. You should have them. But you also should have developers and architects and business people and homeowners involved in this. And we've been having meetings around the city in each council district. And the way it goes is, in many cases, it's the same people who show up every meeting, and they tend to be the people that perhaps disagree with Mike on his concerns about R2, and they get a lot of attention. But what I really would like to see is balance, that we hear from everyone involved, and make a fair choice for the city that we can recognize and frankly respect long-standing individual property rights, and that's my main concern.
One of the things we talked about off air was your concern that this was throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that we're saying no duplexes because there were concerns that there were these McMansions that didn't fit the historic nature or character of a particular neighborhood. And what you were saying is perhaps we can do a different approach where we still have size limits, there's still requirements for certain criteria if indeed the government should assume that role or is going to assume that role. We could have some sort of compromise. Do you think that's possible here and now where we say we're not going to have a total prohibition on R2 in these neighborhoods, but instead we're going to say you're restricted in how big they can be?
Well, that's it's like watching sausage being made, and that's where we are now. No one really knows what's going to happen, but I encourage all property owners to attend these meetings and get involved and to make their voice heard. Because if they don't make their voice heard, it's a good chance that somebody else will try to define what they're thinking, and they probably won't like it. And so we need more than just the same old folks showing up at these meetings. And that's not happening so far.
Well, my experience with property rights is that it's always the people who are the most vulnerable to the policy who are least likely to show up. And in many cases, because the people who don't have the knowledge or they don't have the financial resources. There's probably a lot of property owners out there sitting on R2 properties who are completely unaware of the fact that they could be losing out in future investment potential of the property.
I did a very informal survey about walking the dog. And I think I talked to...
on a leash, I hope.
On a leash, of course.
Is your dog licensed with the city? Because that is a topic for another day.
That's right. Of course he is. And I think I just, over the last, since the first meeting in June, where they introduced the first draft of this code, I think I've probably talked to 8 to 10 just neighbors who also have double lots, R2 lots. And I just asked them, I said, are you aware that there's a rewrite of the zoning code? And one guy was aware. So it was about a 1 out of, I believe, 9. Actually even knew that this was going on. And one of the interesting things is property owners aren't being notified about this. They're having these public meetings. And so it's kind of, the burden is on the property owner to go to the meeting and get involved and figure out what's going on. Because, I mean, someone told me that years ago when they were talking about, when they rezoned Cherry Creek North, that everyone got a letter, every property owner saying, oh, by the way, Mr. Property Owner, your property is, a rezoning is under consideration, and you'll be affected. That's not happening this time.
Why isn't that happening?
It is going to happen.
It is going to happen.
It is going to happen.
I am pleased to announce that as of this week, we have firmed up, and I think we found monies, about $87,000 to mail everyone a postcard.
It's a big mailing.
It's a postcard. I proofed it, and it's, I wish it'd be a little more property rights oriented to get people concerned, because unless you say that on the cover, you turn it over and it's just, it's a lot of government talk, if you will. But I do hope by getting these postcards out before the August meetings that people will attend, the ones who generally do not. Let me also add that I think this comes down to an issue, and I've seen it emerge in my council district, of quite simply property rights versus what some people consider neighborhood rights. And that's a conflict. Because everybody who owns a property doesn't necessarily agree with those who are concerned neighborhoods first. And I think that's where the rub is. And with the advent of the registered neighborhood associations, we have more than 200 now in the city and county of Denver. We actually have, believe it or not, neighborhood associations within neighborhood associations.
Wow.
Which is just, in my judgment, ludicrous. But they come up because of one issue or of a personality clash. And to be sure, we want to hear from the neighbors, but I still think the overriding issue is protecting long-standing individual property rights, and that's my concern with the rewrite of the code.